folks joining. So I'm happy to welcome you all to the 2022 Virtual Finals Competition Field Trip. This is the second event in our virtual finals events. And tonight's field trip is presented by Bart Merrick, the Education Coordinator at the NOAA Chesapeake Bay Office, and Frank Niepold, Senior Climate Education Coordinator at NOAA's Climate Program Office. Sarah Schettinger, Senior Education Program Manager at NOAA's Office of Education, will be assisting them. So Bart and Frank will be presenting on sea level rise and why we should care about what our communities are doing to address that and other climate challenges. They will provide examples from NOAA's Oxford Lab, other community climate action strategies, and what NOAA is doing with respect to addressing sea level rise. During the presentation, feel free to enter any questions you have for the presenters in the chat box. NOSB staff will help to monitor the chat box. We'll also take questions at the end of the presentation. During the presentation, you'll be prompted to provide responses to presenter questions using a Padlet. The presenters will explain how to use that, and we'll provide a link in the chat as well. There's also one shared on the screen right now. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bart and Frank. So thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the introduction, and excited to see everybody online on Zoom for a virtual field trip to kind of celebrate all the kind of amazing work that you all do to prepare for and compete in the science bowls, the National Ocean Science Bowl. So that's pretty awesome. So thank you. And I'm Bart Merrick, and yep, I'm calling in from the Eastern Shore of Maryland in a little town called Easton. And we'll talk more about like my neighborhood in a little bit, but maybe I'll just pass it off to Frank to introduce himself.
Yeah, so awesome to be with you all tonight. I'm not on the Eastern Shore, although I will be there very soon. But I'm actually in another part of Maryland, and so I'm coming to you from our headquarters, the Climate Program Office. So really nice to be with you all tonight. And Sarah, do you want to say hello?
Sure. Greetings. I'm actually currently located in Washington, D.C., so I'm happy to join, and I'll be trying to monitor the chat and drop links in as needed to help Bart and Frank.
Awesome. So, you know, as we were talking about planning this session and thinking about a virtual field trip, you know, a lot of that work is really all about places. And, you know, I live in a place, I work in a place, you all live and work, go to school and study in a place. And what we wanted to do first really is provide an opportunity to get a sense of first, like where you all are coming from around the country, and a little bit about, you know, just maybe your initial thoughts about how climate change might be impacting you and or your communities. And maybe even if you know, like what is your community doing about it? Like, how is your community addressing some of those challenges? And so we're going to use a Padlet to actually explore this. And if you've never used a Padlet before, it's pretty simple. There's the link in the chat that Sarah just shared. And when you click on that, or you can use your phone to kind of get the QR code off the screen right here, it's going to pull up a map. And to add your place to that map, all you have to do is click on that pink or reddish or salmon colored plus sign in the top right of the screen. And what color would you say that is, Frank? Would you say that's salmon?
Yeah, you know, I'm inclined towards salmon, but you know,
so just click on the salmon colored button there at the top right, and that should pop a window for you that'll let you kind of put your place into the overall map. And once you get there, we're just asking that in the kind of box that pops up, if you can just say, you know, that place, like maybe a sentence or a couple words about why it's, you know, maybe it's your home or why it's the place that you picked is important to you for some reason. You don't have to pick your home, and you don't have to do your exact address because we don't want to know exactly where you live. We just want to know, you know, the general area. And then there's questions up at the top of the Padlet, but also the questions on the screen here is, you know, what are some of the climate challenges? And if you know anything about how your community is responding, go ahead and add that to the box. So let's just take like 4 or 5 minutes to just go ahead and put some stuff in this map. So maybe Frank, you can go ahead and click away, or people can go ahead and click on it. We'll see what happens. And actually, if you don't mind, Frank, we can go live to it. So you can click on the link in the slide maybe, and we can see the map happen.
Okay. All right, let's see if I can make that happen there, Bart. I'm working on that as we speak.
Yeah, take your time. People, I'm sure, are just putting their places in there right now, so it's not even no rush.
Oh, I'm rushing.
Oh, rush. Oh, then hurry up.
There we go.
Awesome.
Looks like we've got
Yeah.
So we got
Florida
Naples. Yeah.
I didn't even know there's a College Park, Florida.
Oh, there's College Park, you know, all over the place. There's lots of college parks. So I know some of these are stuff that we put in beforehand.
Yeah.
I know I put this one down here
And one.
in
Oh,
Puerto Rico. Yeah. Really important work down there.
Cool.
So we have Mississippi, Georgia. If I remember right, Georgia. Oh, that's Charlotte. All right. And all right, we got another one over here. And
so
Proud. Okay.
So I was thinking, you know, maybe as people are adding, you know, their spots here and stuff like that, I want to just offer, if anybody wanted to go ahead and raise their hand on the Zoom, you can do that by clicking on the reactions button at the bottom, and there's a raise hand button there. But if you want to raise your hand and then, you know, really, I think we can get you to come off mute and you can tell us a little bit about maybe what you put on the map and what some of those impacts of climate change might be in your area or community. Let me know if you have any volunteers. I'm looking around for hands. And maybe Frank.
Looks like Jamie has her hand.
Okay, cool.
Jamie has the hand up. There you go, Jamie.
Hello. I just said, so I'm from Lexington, Massachusetts, which is a town just to the northwest of Boston. We're about, I think, 30-ish miles from the shore. And in the Northeast, we're seeing more rainfall and shorter, more concentrated storms than we have previously. And coupled with increased urbanization, where we're generally just seeing things like more soil compaction, we're seeing like increased impermeable areas. Really focusing on infiltrating our water and preventing large amounts of runoff have been a priority in my community. So things like, because we've had problems where we've had so much rainfall that it has overflowed some culverts. So to do this, our town has tackled this by basically creating more ways for the water to infiltrate. Things like creating perforated pipes, more catch basins on the sides of streets. They've actually done something recently where along all the street trenches, so on the sides of our streets we have trenches, and along these trenches they have perforated pipes, which effectively help infiltrate all of the water.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Way to go, Lexington. And thank you, Jamie, for sharing that too. Did anybody else want to go ahead and offer a little bit about where they're from and what they're seeing? It's cool to see the spread. We got, you know, a couple West Coasters, a couple Gulf Coasters, a couple East Coasters, a few East Coasters. Frank, you want to share it all about the spot you put down in Puerto Rico?
Yeah, so I mean, I do community service work with my kids' school. My wife teaches there, and we go down to Puerto Rico to help communities get ready for hurricane season. And a lot of the houses have corrugated steel roofs, and so when a hurricane comes through, it just blows off, and everything they own is completely soaked. The solution is actually not to put a corrugated roof back up. And so we go down there and help them put on stronger roofs that are actually reinforced concrete. But it works. So, you know, but there's a lot of risk down there, both on sea level rise on one side and then, you know, extreme supercharged storms coming in on the other side.
So maybe anybody else? Any other takers? If not, we'll go back to the slides, Frank, if that's cool.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Again, like, it was awesome to see where people are from, and I look forward to kind of, and feel free to keep clicking around that map just to see, where your cohorts from, your fellow NOSBers, and some of the things that they might be looking at in terms of both impacts and how they're addressing them. So, it's funny when we were talking about the whole planning effort around this session, the idea of a field trip really kind of resonated. And, we know this is virtual, but, in a virtual context, you can often get a little bit of a sense of place. And we can click to the next one, Frank. And so we wanted to start by, kind of thinking about that question of like climate change, the impacts of climate change, and why should I care? And so I just wanted to spend a minute, kind of sharing a little bit about where I live and work, and kind of why I am really care deeply about both the issue of climate change and how we address it, and the community that's being impacted by it, the one that I live in and I work in. And like I said, I'm coming to you all from the Eastern Shore, Maryland. So that kind of big arrow on the Chesapeake Bay watershed map, that's roughly where Easton is and Oxford. And then there's a blow up of it on the right-hand side. And I put a couple arrows on that map, and I'm hoping you can just remember like these locations. But the top arrow, kind of a little bit east of the water, that's actually called the Causeway, and it's the road. It's the one road going in and out of Oxford. So that's an important piece of infrastructure for accessing the town of Oxford. And then the other arrow, the one kind of down there on the kind of bottom left of that satellite image. Yeah, thanks, Frank. So that's my office. So, I'll get to the punchline real quick right here. And Frank, if you could go to that next slide. So we have the capacity through collecting data on current water levels, and also all the data around climate system, and modeling that data to kind of come up with projections of what things might look like in a few years out to 2100 and beyond. And so when you run the sea level rise scenario for the climate models, well, this is kind of what things look like in Oxford. So we're looking at about up in 2100 up to about 7 feet of sea level rise. And so you can see the Causeway where I put the initial marker, and my office. And so punchline here is, this is why I care. But in the spirit of a field trip, I kind of wanted to show you a little bit around Oxford. So Frank, we can go to that next slide. And we had initially talked about doing this all live and kind of doing a little walk around town, and maybe I would ride the skateboard, but that seemed a little dangerous. And they're paving the roads in Oxford. So there's not even a single road in town right now that I could skateboard down without killing myself. So we're going with the video route. And so Frank, maybe you can go ahead and click, and we'll just tell you a little bit about Oxford. Take you on a little tour.
Awesome.
Hey everybody, I'm Bart. I'm probably talking to you right now, but I wanted to give you a quick tour of the town in which I work, Oxford, Maryland, and tell you a little bit about both how climate and sea level rise might be impacting the town, and also how the town is getting ready. So right behind me is Town Creek, and that's actually the main thoroughfare in town where the lark boats, the folks out crabbing, will come in and unload some of their catch and put in the trucks, send it off the shore. But if you look, the main road into town, it's kind of the only way in and the only way out for everybody that might be living, working, recreating here. And right across the street, I put one of those rulers, and the red mark again is where sea level could be if the when the sea level rises up to 7 feet. As you can see, this road, it would be more part of the harbor. One of the really cool things that the town has actually done is they put these blue markers up around town to kind of show water level when it gets higher, and so people can remember and mark how high that is. This pole stands probably about 2.5 feet, and if you look up on the telephone pole, that's where that 7 foot mark would be if we got 7 feet of sea level rise. This is actually one of my favorite spots in Oxford. It's called Town Park, and this is where me and the kids
would always come to play. There's a nice little playground back there, but a nice little beach too. And one of the key challenges because of sea level rise is actually coastal erosion, or the shoreline's washing away a little bit. So there's a lot of work being done in town and around town to try and protect people's shorelines. But one of the coolest projects is this one in Town Park, where they've used a lot of grasses along with some rocks to try and really protect the shore from the Tredeavon River and the fetch when the winds get high or the storm surge comes in. And these grasses will do a lot to hold the sediment in place. The rocks will hold and protect and reduce the amount of wave action that they're actually exposed to too. So it's a cool spot, beautiful spot, just one of the things. And many of the different public spaces, many of the public spaces around Oxford actually have similar types of shore protection to keep that shore in place. So you remember that causeway or the roadway into town? We call it the causeway, is the main road. And like you saw, a 7 foot of sea level rise would totally swamp that. But even today, we get a lot of flooding, and the flooding happens for all sorts of reasons. Some is related to high tides. Some's related to, just rain events. And the water, if the rain event comes when there's a high tide, that water has nowhere to go. So they have to find places to actually store the water in town. And so all around the town of Oxford, there's a whole bunch of these rain gardens, essentially, that are meant to store the water, hold it in place, let it percolate into the ground, and eventually out into the Tredeavon River. But the key is they need to keep it off the road so people can pass safely on and off the roads. And right behind me, that road right there is called Morris Street. And Morris Street is the road to the Oxford lab. And my first day coming to work, not first day, within the first week of me coming down here to Oxford after having started this job, I actually couldn't get into the work because that entire road right behind me was all flooded. And so I had to find a big truck to actually bring me into work, which is kind of a funny thing. So this is the dock of the Oxford lab, and this is actually where we keep our research vessels. And again, I'm pointing out that we have about 7 feet of sea level rise, which is the potential here, which would bring the water up here on the dock up to about right here. So that's your tour of Oxford. This is where I work, the Environmental Science Training Center on the campus of the Cooperative Oxford Lab. And I hope just seeing what it looks like in a town where we're right on the water, we're going to be very exposed to changing sea levels, just why climate change is an issue and why I care about the challenges presented by it, at least.
Thanks, Frank.
Hey, everybody.
Not again. Hey, but hopefully, I know that was a little campy, a little iPhone-y, but you know what? It was a fun thing to do on a Saturday morning, or actually a Saturday evening, to kind of just think about the town of Oxford and kind of what it is experiencing. And, I guess in doing that, I just kind of wanted to illustrate that two things, really, that, there are people like myself, right, that are really already being impacted by some of the effects of a changing climate, whether that's in that case of Oxford flooding. Typically, storm surges will make that happen, but also just kind of high tides will kind of lead to some of that flooding, and that has an impact on me. But I live out of town, and so when I think about the people that live in Oxford, it's actually a bigger challenge to them. And if we need, hopefully this doesn't happen, but if something did happen to somebody, they got hurt, they needed access to medical care. There's no hospital in Oxford. So that causeway becomes the only way in and out of town. And so it's really, it's just really important to think about that this whole community is kind of on the front lines, is one of those communities that's on the front lines of some of the challenges related to climate change, specifically sea level rise. But it's not limited to Oxford, of course. It's not limited to the United States, really. This is a global problem. And Sarah, if you don't mind dropping a couple of the links in the chat, the one about the coming coast, but helping people understand the impacts of climate change and some of the the people that are impacted it. There's some really cool projects out there. One is called the Blue Line Project. That picture in the lower middle is actually where folks are going around their community to mark where high water will be if the sea level rise scenarios pan out as they expect. And then above that is some imagery, and to the left and right is some imagery from a fellow named Michael Snyder, who put together this project called the Coming Coast, where he went to places, interviewed people, and really tried to, and really did bring to life current kind of climate conditions around like the coasts of Maryland and the Chesapeake Bay region, and helped to try and visualize what that might look like and the people that will be impacted by those changes. And so that's, that's families like the ones that, maybe some of you all are a part of, right? That's where our government, the United States government, is housed in Washington, D.C. So that's the Washington Monument in the background. And D.C. was built in some pretty low land and has some, some sea level rise challenges down the road potentially, right? And then to the right is University of Maryland's Horn Point, and a student there, who's kind of working on oyster restoration and oyster aquaculture issues at UMCs. And so she's thinking about, man, as sea level rise changes, how's that going to impact where I can work and the kind of work I did? So all this stuff, that little video about Oxford, is just to make the point that for issues related to climate change, specifically sea level rise, that impacts our habitats, that impacts like the physical coastline, but really, it really has a significant impact on people. And, if there's one reason we should maybe think about caring, or I'll just say for myself, one reason I care is, because, my family and myself are impacted by this changing climate, by nature of where we live. The communities that we work and associate with are impacted by climate change. And then, and just thinking about that, like the little bit that we're exposed to, and the privilege that we have to be able to respond in many ways, that's not the same for people throughout the world, right? And so this kind of, why is climate change important? Why do we care? It's because it impacts us now, and it is impacting us now, but also, out of, from a, if we just have a little empathy for other people around the world, like this is real, and communities are dealing with it. So that's the other really big point here in Oxford, is that they know the impacts are coming, and they're doing stuff the best that they can, like building rain storage, like protecting shorelines, to keep that from being, to basically try and mitigate or kind of adapt to some of the changes that are coming. So hopefully that tour helped connect you a little bit to Oxford. But again, like Oxford's not the only place taking action and having to deal with climate change. So I'm going to pass it off to Frank to kind of share a little bit more about some other communities around the country that are doing some pretty amazing stuff to address some of these challenges.
Awesome. Thank you, Bart. And hopefully my internet is doing okay. Everyone in my house is home and likely jumping on the internet with us. So I saw a little flaky internet. So if it gets a little, this is nothing new to anybody. We've been doing this for a couple of years. So there's a really cool tool that NOAA has. It's the Sea Level Rise Viewer. And it's what we gave you a little sneak peek to. It's a really important tool because it allows you to investigate anywhere you want and see, and then play with how much sea level rise we should be thinking about. There are two key things to think about there. Where and how much. Where and how much. Not if, but where and how much. So we started thinking about where all the students who are part of this competition are coming from. And so one of the ones that I wanted to show you was Miami. Miami is a really serious challenge when it comes to sea level rise. They know it. So at NOAA, one of the things we do, Bart mentioned this, is that we have these projections about how much sea level rise. But you notice here, I'm using a little bit of a special part of the tool, and it says, basically for, at 2100 for like intermediate or high, it's kind of on the higher side, we're seeing about 5.28 feet of sea level rise in 2100. Now it could be higher. It depends on how much carbon emissions worldwide we have. That's really what drives sea level rise. The more carbon emissions all humanity put together, then we get a higher sea level rise. Lower carbon emissions by everyone together, lower sea level rise. But this also gives us the where. So the scenarios, we just updated them at NOAA recently. So you see the 2022 projections. If you pull that little window down, you can see 2017 And over time, you would expect that to change based on what we do. But you can see here, just to give you some orientation of what this tool can do. But again, how much and where is a really important tool. But if you take a deeper look into, in Miami, for example, they have something called the Miami Forever Climate Ready Plan. And they are elevating key roads in so that they don't flood, like the causeway that Bart was showing you. Well, the way they're solving that is to do lots of things. One of them is to actually just make the roads higher. That'll work for some time, but you can see, but the key thing I think for you to think about is when you're thinking about these issues is sometimes people don't know where we are in the story about climate change. It turns out that many, many, many communities across the country have really taken a serious look at this. And when they're in the coastal communities, they're looking at sea level rise as a real issue that they need to get ready for. That's why it's the Miami Forever Ready, Climate Ready Plan. So it's just one place to think about. Now, I'm from Philadelphia, and Philadelphia, turns out that one of the real issues in Philadelphia, now the sea level rise is a little, for the intermediate high, 2100, it's a little less, but the main issue there is the airport. So if you've ever flown in and out of the Philadelphia airport, it's in the very low-lying place. That's why it's there. It's an old marsh that they've put an airport on. Well, now sea level rise is a real issue. So what to do about that? And so, one of the stories there is that the people, so Roy, he is the environmental manager for that airport. And the question he has is, we have to move the airport, but where should we put it? That's a really interesting question. Cities moving airports is a really big deal. Most of the land is already spoken for, and putting an airport somewhere that's well developed is a real challenge. So for Philadelphia, that's one of the challenges they're facing. But when you come up to New York, that's Manhattan there, and Jersey City on the left, and Brooklyn on the right. Notice where Manhattan floods, all along the edge. And so in Manhattan, they've got some crazy ideas. And I don't mean crazy bad, just crazy big. Well, it's New York after all. So they're doing something like this, where everywhere the water touches the city, along the rivers on either side of Manhattan and in Brooklyn, is they're building these kinds of parks, but are able to protect the storm surge and ultimately sea level rise. But you'll notice that those parks are slowly getting transformed along the edge. But then you look at this illustration, this is on the Manhattan side. The entire edge of the city down there in the southern tip of Manhattan, the plan is to grow land into the East River and then out into the Hudson and build residential parklands, but really it's a sea level rise wall, living lands and hard lands. But this is the plan, is to build that seaport coastal resilience through a battery coastal resilience plan. And you can see in the diagram, this is the kind of stuff that cities and towns are working on. Not all cities and towns have plans like this, and not all of them are really robust. But in any town that's on the coast, this is what they're beginning to do. So just to give you some sense of the scale of thought and action related to what NOAA does, which is help them with the science. When you think about a town like Boston, and so I appreciate the Lexington is just a little bit off to the left. I know this town well, my sister used to live there, but in Boston, they're doing something similar. And you can see down here in the right where Boston, the main part of downtown Boston is, notice that flooding ring. Well, in Boston, this is what they're slowly building towards, a master plan that recreates where the water touches the city in order to deal with the flooding, but also make it a recreational purpose, multi-purpose. But the thing I found really interesting about Boston's plan is this. Think about all the kinds of solutions over time where the one I love is the floating buildings, like those areas where they're going to flood often, make them floodable. and multi-purpose, so that land serves functions. This idea of dry flooding proofing or temporary flood walls or floodable parks or absorbent streets, all those kinds of concepts, communities all over the country are innovating new ways to figure out how to live in the coastline and not suffer the damages from sea level rise or coastal flooding. And you know, this is a big transformation. If you are thinking about doing any kind of work related to this, you'll be in good shape because there's a whole lot of work to be done for the coming decades, which I think is a really important thing for young people to think about. So that's where I'm going to end. Bart, you want to pick it up from here?
Yeah, so we wanted to offer so given all that context, I mean, maybe we'll just pause here to see if anybody has any quick comments or questions that they wanted to offer, ask Frank or myself before we go to this next piece.
Awesome. I'm happy to do it.
And you can put them in the chat, and it's cool to see, like, Jamie, I mean, some of these places you've spent some time or you live or you have some connections. So I don't know if it's cool, but it's I mean, it's important to know, like, Jamie, this is your sounds like a rental property is in better shape than others, maybe because it has that floodable basin. And I don't know if that just means like you put stuff up on shelves or if it's like good pumps to get stuff out of there, but that's kind of.
So Bart, one of the cool things about and Jamie, you may be able to validate this, is that a lot of times when houses, the heating and cooling and other things are in the basement of a building, if there is one. And that's one of the first things that gets destroyed when it floods. And so one of the solutions is to start moving those kinds of called mechanicals up higher in the building so that when it floods, it doesn't do damage. And in fact, Boston has a goal of buildings near the coastline would flood and you could pump the water out and be working building for whatever purpose it is, a bank, a school, whatever, 24 hours later, which means you have to design the buildings fundamentally differently and build them and manage them in a very different way. So anyway, that's the kind of stuff that's coming. Let's get smart.
Yeah. There's a couple of questions in the chat, and Arjun, I mean, your question about like if you're interested in these issues and want to pursue them, like what makes sense in terms of college routes or experiences to seek. And I mean, I like if urban planning or this climate resilience planning is something that you're interested in. I mean, certainly, like I'm trying to think of like some schools that have good planning programs. Usually it's a master graduate level thing.
I got one.
Bring it.
So my first degree was Bachelor of Fine Arts at Temple University Tyler School of Art. The reason I bring that up is not because that's an answer to your question, but it is because the Tyler School of Art at Temple University has taken the urban planning major and moved it to the art and design school. And so my niece is actually graduating actually later this week in urban planning from Temple University's art school. So what we're finding is that universities, colleges are starting to innovate these new programs to do exactly what you are asking for, which is a really important question because we need a lot more people doing this. And it's going to show up in schools in interesting ways. But I do definitely know of one, and that's Temple University in Philadelphia. But it's an emerging need, and schools are beginning to create those. The other solution to that is to find people who are doing this job right now and ask them where they went to get to school.
Yep.
And what majors they should have taken or what classes they should have taken because they're doing it right now. And they're probably like, on second thought, I would do this instead. But I bet you they would answer your question.
And just to kind of to follow up, like internships and volunteering, like those are one of those things that are, like Frank said, those local planning departments or those local groups, definitely checking in with them to see if there are opportunities there. And I'll just add that, and Frank, you might want to back this up, or Sarah even, like in places like New York State, right? Planning departments are somewhat limited in terms of like the staff capacity that they might have to be able to address some of these challenges. And they're actually, New York specifically, like through their Climate Smart Communities program, has been working with some high school students, where those high school students are actually, helping the planning departments with capacity to kind of like do some of the, I'll call it grunt work, but like some of the really important foundational work to understand like what some of the opportunities are, some of the challenges are in each one of those communities, like catalog energy use and kind of do a lot of that kind of reporting stuff for these municipalities that they wouldn't otherwise do, that helps them think more critically and strategically about how do they prepare for some of these challenges. And those, I would probably argue that there's departments like that are a little under-resourced and could use some of that support, and just that access to it that would be really kind of cool.
So Bart, to build on what you're saying, I want you all to think about how many communities are in the United States.
Yeah.
There are like 30,000 of them. Now, when you think of a city like Boston, Philadelphia, New York, Miami, like we showed in the examples, they're going to have much more financial resource, can hire experts to can come in and help them, and they'll get great plans. They're going to be in much better shape. The smaller communities are actually really having a hard time. And so what Bart shared with you is absolutely true. You may be the person in your community that has the ability to spin up on what a vulnerability assessment is, a greenhouse gas inventory, convening communities around planning for what to do, what to prioritize, Diana, your question about which places should be occupied, that's a community process. Yeah. And the people who are really good at that are going to be the ones who can actually do that well. And so stepping forward into that is for, especially for small communities that don't have a lot of financial resources, they can't hire this expertise. That's a really important question for all these communities to face. And I think that's what we're finding is that high school students sometimes are the ones who actually can get there the fastest. So that story that Bart shared with you about small communities in New York is true. I've met both of them. They're amazing high school students, and they're doing really important work for their community. So we never thought that would go that far, but it is absolutely true.
Cool. Yeah, great questions, y'all, and thank you. And I think points towards a couple things, like what some of the challenges the communities face, and what is the process like for dealing with those challenges? Like how do we make decisions about where it's safe to live and where we continue to support people living and others, and then also like what do we, you all being kind of thinking maybe about careers and stuff like that. There is a lot of opportunity. Like all those challenges that we looked at, they're all actually in some ways opportunities for people to do really meaningful work in these spaces. And of course, like all this stuff, it connects us as people, it connects us as communities, but it also has the opportunity to kind of connect us to the ocean. And so Frank, or Sarah, can you, if you don't mind, if you could drop this next Padlet into the chat. And we wanted to take a couple minutes for you all to do just a little bit of thinking about a couple questions, like how are you connected to the ocean? Oops. And am I gone?
Nope, I hear you.
Okay. Wow, that's weird. Like, how are you connected to the ocean? And then, how might that connection change because of the rising sea levels or other climate impacts? And so the ask here is use that link, go to this Padlet, and just put a couple thoughts in terms of your connection to the ocean and how that how sea level rise might impact those connections down the road. Sea level rise or climate change generally. Yeah, thanks, Ryan.
And if anybody has a question, or while we're doing this, while you're filling this in, I'm happy to if you want to just jump off mute and ask away. You know, one of the questions I sometimes people will call me up and ask me, because I'm the NOAA Climate Education Coordinator, and they'll you know, and then they'll ask, and then they say, where should I live? And I get it all the time. And why we thought this was a good question is because you're in the National Ocean Science Bowl. You should know that I mean, that the ocean, and we're connected to it fully because we live on a planet, but we're all connected. So, you know, if your house is okay, just like Bart was saying in that story about Oxford, you know, we're connected by a road. My house might not flood, but my ability to go out or get in is connected by a road, which is connected to other people. So I think these are great questions to ponder, just so we understand that we're deeply connected.
I find myself really wanting to put a heart or a +1 on some of these, but I can't.
You forgot to turn that one on, Bart.
I did. I didn't even think about it until now. I was like, oh, I want a +1 some of these. Yeah, especially the education one. That was solid.
Wow, that's a powerful line. The ocean runs through my veins.
Yeah,
it does. All our veins. Mm-hmm. I find that transportation one, I was just in San Diego at the port of San Diego, and it is such an important connection that a lot of people don't pay attention to enough.
While we're watching these, I just want to call your attention to the fact that Jamie Yu has put in the chat, what is the most interesting device or technology that you've seen combat sea level rise? What technology or devices what are technology or devices that you dream of having, or what do we still need?
Well, so there's two ways to think about this question. One is the thing that's driving sea level rise is carbon emissions building up and warming the planet. That's what's driving sea level rise. So all the ways of making energy that aren't coming from fossil fuels or carbon sources, those are great. Figuring out how to deploy them at scale is a really important one. So so that's one way of looking at that, right? Like EVs and solar panels and wind farms and batteries and all of that side of the equation. The other technology, which is not actual technology, is all the things that pull carbon out of the atmosphere: trees, mangroves, kelp forests, prairies, regenerative agriculture. I don't know about these giant vacuums that are being built to suck. I'm not sure about that one yet, but strengthening our forests and our ecosystems to be able to pull carbon out of the atmosphere that's already been put up there. It's not technology, but it is a key part of the part. And then the last piece is, what are we doing? Like that picture I showed you with Boston, all those crazy ideas about what you would have to do, like floating buildings. I'm really, for whatever reason, floating buildings is really stuck in my mind. Like maybe Miami would look more like Venice in the future.
Yeah. I'll just say, I'm sure there are a lot of innovative kind of seawall-y type things that can exist and might exist at some point to kind of keep water out of places, like these really large grand infrastructures and stuff like that. But to me, like those are kind of, the walls, right? They keep things from happening. But to me, like some of the more innovative technologies that are being employed to kind of help us manage the sea level rise that's occurring and stuff like that are those ones that kind of bring in what we call that green infrastructure or green and blue infrastructure. So that's like living shorelines. So shorelines that are planted and like the one that Frank showed in New York City, right? That is meant to absorb, hold, slow down the water for a period of time. Not totally keep it out, not totally prevent it, but like actually use some environmental systems or, ecological systems to be able to help us, deal with some of the challenges, but also provide, probably some benefits down the road for those systems, those coastal systems, and just thinking about a little different way. And like one specific thing is oysters. So we use oysters in the Chesapeake a lot for habitat, for fish and other things like that. But it turns out, especially like in the what we call the intertidal, like when oysters are sometimes exposed to air and sometimes not, down in the southern Chesapeake Bay and other warmer ports, warmer areas, like those oyster reefs can serve as like pretty good breakwaters for storm surge and things along those lines to slow that water down. And they're really effective, but it's an oyster reef and we need to bring them back anyway. So it's like a twofer in some ways. And it's kind of thinking about how we can engage natural systems and natural things to help us deal with some of these challenges, as opposed to just, straight up walls and things along those lines. That's my opinion on it though. Yeah, we need both. That's right.
Boy, do we need both. Just the magnitude of both is when you actually look at the amount of carbon sequestration, just the amount is when you model it, it's a lot. And the amount of transition of industry, electricity, transportation, food, land use, it's a lot. The good news is that we're getting closer to knowing how much and whether or not we're making progress. So, Bart, I wonder if we should go back to the presentation to jump to the final.
Let's do it.
The final. All right. I mean, I'm deeply impressed with these two columns, did that work? Did I get lucky?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm seeing your screen with the there you go.
All right, cool. Wow, yay! I got smarter today. Hey Bart, you want to do this or you want me to?
I'll let you kick it off and I'll jump in. We can alternate.
Okay. So NOAA has an amazing mission. You may already know all about us, and that's cool, but it bears a little repeating, right? So NOAA has this massive mission. And so, but we do the science and we do the observations, but that's all to the end of protecting life, property, fisheries, and coasts, right? So we're in a very important space. So, whether it's tornadoes and being able to predict them and then warn people and help them know what to do when that warning comes in order to not lose life. Hurricanes and all the work we do to protect people from hurricanes, but then also to know how much rain is happening and being able to better understand patterns and trends. Our models, we saw in this conversation tonight, models like the sea level rise models, but also and thereby to predict that. But we also have the ability to do that with carbon dioxide trends. And this, if you ever get a chance to go on the Big Island, you got to go to the Mauna Loa Observatory. There's a little book you can sign in there. It's a good thing. Don't say anything to your car rental place because they won't let you go up there.
Oh, really?
But you can do it anyway. Just don't say anything about where you're going. I didn't say that.
Yeah.
But we do all this research and studies and explore the planet. And so some of the images here are people involved in the agency. We're trying to figure out different pieces of the puzzle and then combine them together, whether it's, this one here on actually studying sea level, living shorelines to build resilience for communities, or, trying to understand how marine life is being impacted or changing, or, figuring out new technologies on how to measure hurricanes, like this sail drone, an autonomous surfboard with a sail that fly it in and just drive it into a hurricane, so no one gets hurt in the process. All these kinds of things is inside NOAA's mission. But also, in order for that, the foundation of that is we collect tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of data. And then we share that earth science data around the world. So, whether it's tide gauges to see whether or not how the tides are changing, that's one image there. Or, to research to better understand how coastal marshes are dynamically moving with sea level rises. The marshes actually are building up organically to deal with that. And these researchers are studying that. these are the kinds of things that NOAA does. Bart, do you want to pick up here, given you work at the Oxford lab? You know, you might have a little more to do with this.
Sure. And I think like one of the other cool things for me in terms of NOAA and our organization is that, we're out of the Department of Commerce, right? So moving goods and products, like I saw a lot of reference to in the, the ocean connection and stuff like that, right? That's part of the mission, or that's part of what NOAA's mission is meant to sustain. And that's like mapping changes in our bathymetry, or, kind of the underwater environment, and also making sure that the tools we use to navigate safely around our coastal areas are accurate. And that helps us, kind of support the economic infrastructure around here. And we can go ahead and go to the next one. And all this NOAA work, like, so all the data we collect, all the models that are generated, the things that happen, like they happen because people are working, everywhere from really the depths of the ocean to looking outward at the sun and stuff like that. So we work in the sea, we work in the sky, to collect that data, to do that research, to understand how these systems are and how they are changing over time. And we can click to the next one.
Before you go there, one thing to know, I didn't know this when I was your age, that these vessels have something called NOAA Core officers on them. It's a uniform service. It's a great service to think about. I didn't know about it. And if I had, I probably would have been a NOAA Core officer back when I was 17 or 18. But just a note.
Just on that, Frank, I applied for the NOAA Core, and they told me I was too old, and I was. So do it soon if you're going to do it. Look into it. Don't wait until
there you go.
Your late 30s. Anyway, go ahead. And kind of, I think the mission that is near and dear to Sarah, to Frank, and myself, and probably our colleagues at the Ocean Science Bowl, and maybe you all, is that core to NOAA's mission, you heard Frank say it, is like not just collecting this information and this data and producing the science stuff, but also being able to share that in a way that people can actually use it to make informed decisions. And so, I think NOAA, as part of NOAA's mission to do that and support the stewardship of our kind of coastal natural resources and beyond, education is key, right? And a lot of these challenges that we've been talking about related to sea level rise, like in some ways we kind of know what to do and how we might want to respond, but the kind of more sustained support for education so that people can make informed decisions based on these really complex issues and these really complex systems, and really thinking about all that is an education problem that NOAA is trying to address by being deeply engaged in education. And we support education programming through things like this, right? Through working with young people to help kind of share some of the NOAA stories and some of the NOAA work out there. And then, Sarah helps run probably one of the coolest funding programs that exists out here that actually supports financially programs around this country that are working in education spaces, in communities, in schools. And so that's kind of a couple ways that NOAA does that, but education is core and really important to the work we do. And frankly, I love the opportunity to kind of check in with you all and share some of that NOAA story.
Absolutely. You want to do this one, Bart, or you want me to?
I think you can take it. Go.
So one of the coolest things about NOAA and our mission, one is that it's a really broad mission. A lot of different kinds of people and expertise are needed in order for this to happen. Sometimes we focus on the scientists. There are a whole lot more people at NOAA than there are scientists. In my division, we have artists, GIS specialists, writers, editors, videographers, educators, technicians. It's not just scientists in order for this mission to happen, but it is an amazing group of people. And one of the things that it makes I find really true about NOAA is collaboration. We are one of the most hyper collaborative organizations I've ever worked with. I hope you're getting a feeling for that here, but it is absolutely true. And obviously we have a really important mission in our agency, is to make the nation diversity represented in the workforce and the people working with us similar, if not the same, if not better. So it's a really important part of our mission is the people itself. And that's actually why we're here, because we need more people to help us continue this mission. And in order for that to happen, we have a lot of programs to support you. And so if you don't know the student opportunity page, please go there, look at the dates, look at the programs, think about them. And there's programs for many different stages of your educational preparation, from high school sometimes all the way through postdoc. And these are really, really important. They're competitive, but that's not something that you guys would probably shy away from. But it's definitely one to think about as you move forward in whatever pathway you choose to go. So just want to make sure that that was an opportunity for you. And so, wow, we have a minute. But we can go a little longer if I remember right, if things are but you know, wow, sorry. It's a lot to say.
Good. I mean, yeah, I would just say, like, yeah, if there's other questions or thoughts, like this is the time to ask them. And, you know, I'll just say, thank you, like, ask away before I even say thank you for joining us for this past hour. Like, what questions you got? What other you want to know? I see some cool stuff in the chat, and Sarah, thanks for jumping on that.
Yeah, folks, feel free to, raise your hand and your Zoom hand as well.
I'm going to drop us off sharing, just so I can see everybody.
All right, well, it looks like we might be out of questions, but Frank, Bart, Sarah, thank you for this. This was super exciting and fun and interesting. I know I learned a lot, and I hope all the rest of our NOSBers did too. NOSBers, thank you for your comments, your insight, your questions. It was really cool. So we are recording this, and we will post it to our YouTube channel. We'll also then be sharing that link through our social media, and we would love it if all of you would share it with your friends and family so that they can tune in and learn some of this cool stuff about sea level rise in our communities as well. So thanks again for joining us tonight, and good luck this coming weekend with the first part of the competition. We'll see you all Friday night for the opening ceremony.
Thank you.
Good luck, everybody. Thank you.
Kristen, thank you, everybody.